But first, in an initiative welcomed by Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin this Sunday proposed direct talks with Ukraine in Istanbul on May the 15th. His offer came a day after the leaders of France, Germany, Poland, and the UK met Volodymyr Zelensky in Kyiv, during which they urged the Kremlin to agree to that 30-day unconditional ceasefire starting on Monday or face more sanctions. Well, Volodymyr Zelensky welcomed Putin's offer, though he said only on the condition that Moscow accepts that U.S.-backed proposal. And then the Russian and Turkish leaders spoke by phone this Sunday to discuss Vladimir Putin's offer. Erdogan reportedly telling his Russian counterpart that he fully accepts the offer and is indeed ready to host talks, according to the Kremlin. Well, for more on this, France 24's international affairs editor Philip Turle joins me on set. Hi, Philip. So the Kremlin is reportedly taking into account the abandoned 2022 draft deal known as the Istanbul Communique, as well as the reality of Russia's current control of over a fifth of Ukraine. What do we know about what was in that Istanbul Communique, and how might it affect these potential negotiations?
Well, I think what we're seeing here is what we've seen several times in the past is a proposal this time round for a 1-month ceasefire, which was touted originally by Donald Trump and picked up by the Europeans. That's been put forward as something that the West wants Russia to agree to, with a move towards a long-term ceasefire and even a peace deal. The Russians have given a counter-proposal, which is what Vladimir Putin often does, saying basically yesterday, and we heard this from the Kremlin, that they won't give in to pressure from the West. So Vladimir Putin has come up with a counter-proposal for these peace discussions to take place in Istanbul in Turkey beginning on Thursday. So we have this gap between Monday, when the ceasefire that the West wants should come into effect, and the peace talks that Vladimir Putin is talking about on Thursday. So we don't know whether Russia is going to agree to a truce between now and then. It looks pretty much like Russia wants to continue on the battlefield because it knows that it's got more to gain on the battlefield than it does going to the negotiating table. So what could be in these discussions? Well, it's pretty obvious that both sides are not going to agree on much, because on the Russian side, you'll have Vladimir Putin saying, we want to keep hold of Crimea, we want to keep hold of the districts that we already have conquered in eastern Ukraine, we don't want Ukraine to become a member of NATO, and we don't want Ukraine to become a member of the European Union. From Ukraine's point of view, what they will say is, well, we can't hand over vast swathes of our territory without a referendum in Ukraine to be able to do that. In a state of war that we're in right now, we're unable to hold a referendum. It's virtually impossible. So we can't agree to what Russia is putting forward. Another point that also the two sides will not agree upon is this coalition of the willing and the pledge to send peacekeepers into Ukraine. The United Kingdom and France have both said they will commit troops to the area. These are peacekeepers, are not going to take part in active combat against Russian forces. But Russia's already made it known that they are against the idea of peacekeepers being deployed in Ukraine, because they say, well, it will be just like NATO forces in Ukraine, and that's something that they can't accept right now. So if these discussions do take place on Thursday, it's not going to be very easy for any kind of an agreement to come out of that. I think this is why Ukraine, the United States, and also the coalition of the willing have all said what they wanted: a 30-day ceasefire, first of all, and then peace discussions to take place afterwards. What the Russians are saying is, let's go to the negotiating table straight away. We'll talk about a ceasefire later.
So if these talks do indeed take place in Istanbul, Flip, what do you think that we could expect to see?
I think that it's very difficult to know exactly what is going to happen. I think one of the interesting points here is what the United States is going to do next, because the person who has the most clout in this, whether you like him or loathe him, is Donald Trump. And Donald Trump, as we've seen, has swung from supporting Ukraine to then being very critical of Ukraine. Remember that shouting match in the Oval Office on the 28th of February between Volodymyr Zelensky and Donald Trump, then not criticizing Russia's President Vladimir Putin, even describing Vladimir Putin as a friend. now we don't really know what Donald Trump is going to do, because Vladimir Putin has agreed to come to the negotiating table, and Donald Trump has said this is a major step forward, which is true, that we are moving slowly, step by step, towards something. But I think there's fear in Ukraine now that because Vladimir Putin has offered something to Donald Trump, that Donald Trump is now going to come back and start putting pressure again on Volodymyr Zelensky to hand over to Vladimir Putin exactly what he wants, just to arrive at some kind of ceasefire deal as quickly as possible, and possibly some kind of peace deal in the long run. This is something that Volodymyr Zelensky says he cannot do. So it's very unclear now whether or not there's going to be pressure on Vladimir Putin, whom Donald Trump thinks isn't doing enough, or whether Donald Trump thinks is doing the right thing, and whether or not he wants to continue supporting or not Volodymyr Zelensky. So a lot up in the air. I think we're going to find more of an answer to all of this in the next couple of days or so.
Philip Turle, thank you very much.